right, guys, I think we're live. Welcome back to the Death by Tyranny podcast. Just trying to get the week started off right with a podcast to maybe get you guys thinking about something a little bit different. Now, I know it's late. Not a lot of people listen to this, but one of the things that really made Alex Jones what he is today was not only was he a great showsman and was very talented when it came to kind of trying to shock and awe people, but the shock and awe really came from the fact that he was able to think outside the box. Have you ever noticed that a lot of people give Alex Jones credit for being right, almost looking into the future? Well, it's not really that he's looking into the future, it's that he's looking outside of the box. So he's able to see things that are concerning, dealing with the public safety or our freedoms and liberty, or our children in some cases. And so when he brings these things to people, of course, it's not things that we want to hear. So this is where the shock factor comes into play. And like I said, it's not as if he is just making up stories just for the shock factor. He is just willing to look and really try to look beyond the concept that everything in the world is good. So it almost seems as if he can see harm coming. And that's what I want to try to do tonight. There's something that I think not a lot of people have been paying attention to. And I think that even the patriots, the freedom-loving Americans, the people that are already on board with the fact that the federal government is being tyrannical and stripping away our freedoms and liberties right from underneath our nose, are kind of missing the mark, not really noticing what's right out in front of them, and almost playing into the narrative of the other side. It's as if we're giving them cover to fight against us. Now, I want you to think about the military wars that we fought for the last 20 years. And what was kind of the concept around the small arms version or concept of those wars. Well, what we did was we went to the M4 platform around the 5.56 cartridge under the idea that we could carry more rounds, be lighter, faster, smoother. And this has seemed to work for the most part in our advantage. So much so that many other of the world's superpower militaries have also gone with this concept. Now, of course, you have the conflict in Russia and Ukraine going on right now. And they did a draft in Russia. And a lot of those people that have been drafted into the military over there have been issued 7.62 by 39 rifles, more than likely because the Russian military had an abundance of leftover ammunition and small arms that was able to take that cartridge. But I would almost be willing to bet that they're actual war fighters that have had extensive training and that was not drafted, and that the Russian military has put a conscious effort into making elite military fighters, are probably carrying some type of a 5.45 by 39 round which if you don't know, the Russian military developed to compete with the American 5.56. Now, the Chinese military, on the other hand, it's a little bit harder to know what they're working on. But even through the last 20 years or so, they've kind of gone with this concept as well. Whether it be 5.45 by 39 or the 5.56, and I'm sure they have something in development of their own, if not already implemented into their armies. And then you have North Korea, which is just as quiet, but has also been seen to use the 5.45 by 39 or 5.56 cartridge. And here it is in 2022, our military has come out and said that we must upgrade, which most conservatives, most people that support the United States military would agree with. That war is ever evolving and that we must hold an advantage to be able to always be that leading superpower on a world stage. But if this concept of the smaller cartridge to carry more, be lighter, faster, quieter, if this concept has worked so well, then why is our military designing and has already designed, as well as begun to issue, a new cartridge, the 6.8 Spear, which in a lot of ways resembles the 308. It's a bigger, more powerful cartridge, if you will, with a lot of velocity, very, very fast round. And the SIG Spear, the M4 styled platform with a little new age twist on it, more of a piston style platform than your direct blowback rifle like your M4s, but looks and resembles it in a lot of ways. It's a heavier rifle. Not only is it a heavier rifle, but this cartridge is going to be a little bit more wieldy to handle. Therefore, to try and rush and arm a large portion of our military with this round and this rifle, you're going to see a little bit of loss in accuracy. Especially if our military wants to continue down this equality death trap that they seem to be going down. You're going to have weaker, more feminine soldiers that are unable to handle this round and this rifle as well as they could the M4 or the 5.56 in any platform, really. And maybe they do go with the SIG Spear and a 5.56 for some of the smaller framed individuals. Or maybe they keep M4s issued for a long period of time to come until whatever the United States military is really worried about is over. But why do this now? Well, they're worried about actually going to war with a first world country, an actual superpower like Russia. Well, Russia is currently at war with Ukraine, yet we are still seeing the same old 5.45 by 39 round, the same AK-47 that they've used for the last 50 plus years. And of course, to have something better than what we've had for the last 50 years would give us an advantage when it comes to fighting a superpower like Russia. But one of the biggest advantage and design elements going into the 6.8 spear round was the velocity. How fast this round can rotate upon impact. Why is that a big deal? Well, because to defeat body armor, velocity is the biggest factor in that. A lighter, faster round will defeat body armor a lot faster than a bigger, slower round will. So for the United States government to develop a bigger, faster round is somewhat of an engineering feat. And it is also why you've seen the gun community be so wowed by this firearm. Now, sure, there are people out there that say this firearm is ugly. And I don't really get where you can base that argument off of, because it resembles the M4 so closely, with the little minute details that may differ between the two platforms. But I think with the popularity of the SIG MCX, which is pretty much what the SIG Spear was designed after, just in a different cartridge, we have already begun to see that this piston upper is somewhat of a more versatile platform. Now, the ergonomics of the M4, of course, have carried over, so it's not losing anything compared to the M4. And not only that, even if you had that the M4 was able to shoot a 5.56 cartridge, go to the 308 platforms of the M4 style variants, as well as 300 blackout, but the MCX can do the same. So it's definitely not losing anything compared to the M4. And if there truly wasn't an advantage of the MCX style piston small arms platform over the M4, I don't think you would still, almost 10 years later, be seeing the premium and the demand that you see for them. People would have figured out by now that they're not worth that kind of money on the civilian market. Now, when you're in the military, you kind of shoot what you get. But us as civilians, somewhat anyways, and not in a lot of other ways, but for the most part, we can pick and choose the firearms that we equipped ourselves with. And the demand still for the MCX platform has only grown to the point where I've seen less of them, not more of them. And it's not because SIG just doesn't feel like making them. Clearly, there is money to be made with this platform. You've not seen a decrease in price, even with them bringing the MCX Lite out over the last week or so. You're still going to see a premium. When the MCX hit the market, I believe you could get them somewhere in between the $1,700 to $2,000 range. And that was still a premium because they were very sought after even in the beginning. But now you're seeing the MSRP straight out of the gate be $25 plus $100 at your local gun store, if you can find them. Now, the MCX Lite or the Spear Lite, this is going to see even more demand and even more of a price increase. But this is more or less just to give you kind of the background on the platform itself. It's not really the conspiracy or the Alex Jones portion of tonight's podcast. Where I want to go with laying out some of the design features of the cartridge of the 6.8 Spear is that, like I said, one of the biggest design driving factors behind that cartridge was the ability to defeat body armor. Now, sure, you can make an argument that this would come in handy if you were going up against a superpower like Russia. But I've seen a lot of footage where Ukrainian soldiers and the style that Russian infantry has been combating them with have still been able to defeat them with less means and less numbers in any given individual battle with their body armor, with, in a lot of ways, very outdated small arms and military equipment. So I have to wonder, when the 6.8 begun to be pushed heavily and backed heavily by our federal government in funding to develop this cartridge, there was also something else going on here in the United States. And that was, you've seen the civilian population really grasp the potentials of why you should own body armor as a civilian, more than just to have it. That in a lot of ways, to be any kind of real threat to a tyrannical government, body armor would come in very heavily demanded quantities, very sought after. Now, body armor isn't everything, but Russia has had body armor for 20 plus years. So why just in the last 5, when the American civilian population has grown their marketing demand for body armor, did the U.S. military really start to heavily fund the development of this high velocity round? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are a lot more in the know than I am, but I would have to think that somewhere in our federal government, especially with the people that are in power right now, that the ability to defeat our own civilian population has come into play. And not only that, but I would almost have to think you would be naive to the point you are mentally retarded if you don't think that there are military assets that live and breathe that are fighting for Ukraine and Russia. On the Russian side, there's probably multiple reasons for an American warfighter to be on that soil defending Russia. But I would almost, in the same breath as saying you would have to believe that they're there fighting for Russia and for Ukraine, that one of those reasons would be what a federal government does to fight off a civilian population of an entire country. And then from a Ukrainian standpoint, I'm sure it would just as much come in handy to know what a civilian population would do to fight off a federal superpower like Russia. And if you don't think that they will take the data points that they learn from what is going on over there and apply it in some shape or way in training in our own military to be able to combat a civilian militia on the smaller aspect of things, as well as an entire disruptive, and rebellious civilian population of our own country. And I don't think a lot of us think when it comes to what our military is doing to combat violence, what they are implementing in the Army and other branches of our military as being methods and ways to fight against our own population. I think there is still a large portion of civilians in America that refuse to believe that. Even some of your more patriotic ones that have served in the military will never be able to grasp that concept that our own government would use what they are using on other countries, on terrorist organizations, on their own population here in America. But we already know that this is the case. This is happening. You just have to look outside the box. We know that the Patriot Act, among other things that the federal government has developed and passed legislation and used the driving factor of enemies of the United States, of combating terrorist organizations. They have used that fear of the American people to implement it, to put it into place, but then it has been used on our own civilian population. This is just legislation. This is just politics. These are just laws that are being used against our own population. And they do just as much damage as small arms and military violence can do. So, is it really that big of a stretch of an idea to think that our military isn't designing military weaponry and tactics to fight off their own population? The last podcast we talked about articles being released that have openly admitted that the World Health Organization, along with plenty of governments around the world, including our own, with as much influence as in power as the United States have, I would almost say that they were one of the driving factors of the coronavirus being developed. That the reason why it was being developed in a lot of ways was to see how fast a population of a country would obey the federal government. Now, I'm sure it wasn't exactly stated like that. Maybe it was. I've seen plenty of articles that have stated this, and they are legit organizations, news sources. So if they're trying to see how fast they can get their populations to obey tyrannical orders and legislation, you don't think that they have a plan B? What about the people that don't obey? Now, I think a good portion, probably more than half, will obey. And we have seen this with coronavirus, especially over the last 2 years. But no matter how powerful of psychological warfare the federal government is capable of, I'm sure you are going to have some aspect of the people rebel, just to rebel. Not even just because they are patriotic and love freedom and liberty, but because they hate the federal government. So I would have to believe that they would have some type of a plan to deal with those people. And maybe they don't need small arms and military violence to combat that. We've seen the people that have great influence and financial power, social media followings. We've seen these people that go against the federal government and combat this idea of obedience be controlled and defeated without violence. But we've also seen people in cases be violent. So we know that our military plans for contingencies. And anything that any of us are thinking right now, I guarantee you there is a plan to combat that. Even if there was a large portion of our population that was willing to stand up right now, the federal government is ready for that opportunity and probably to end that as quickly as possible. And so I think that us as gun enthusiasts, especially the ones in the know, some of the cloners, some of the people that pay attention more so to military, artillery, and things of that nature, we really need to start paying attention on what it would be like and what we would need to do to combat what our federal government is developing and implementing and issuing right now. Because what we have access to is in a lot of ways inferior to that. And even the things that are on the level that might be somewhat equal to what an infantry base of the military would be issued, it's very hard to come by. It's very expensive. And maybe there's some type of conspiracy to be thought of to do with that. If SIG could make so much money selling these MCX styled platforms, are they just content with the money that they're making from the military? I doubt that very much. That's not how greedy corporations work. And there are plenty of people in our own communities around the gun industry and gun-loving Americans that support SIG, that say that this is a company that is for freedoms and liberties. And I think that is just a ridiculous statement. For one, SIG is a German-based country with, I'm sure, ties to the worst forms of government known to mankind. And for them to come over to the United States because they have some type of love and willingness to help the civilian population to defend our freedoms and liberties, you really think that has anything to do with what SIG's doing? You're out of your mind. SIG doesn't give a shit about gun control, about our right to keep and bear arms. They only care about what's going to make them the most money. What's going to keep them in front of the spotlight. So they are going to keep developing what governments, what the people who have control over the largest amount of the financial banks and industry, they're going to always want to be able to impress those that control that, the money. So when a government wants to be able to fight off a civilian population that is unruly, they are going to be the first ones in line to help develop anything that those people in control of taxpayer money would be asking for. And like I said, I think this has at least something to do with the design of the new 6.8 Spear cartridge. Because the faster, lighter round has worked in military battle. It is still being proven to work in military battle. But what works on civilian populations? Power, fear. So instead of the ability to put more accurate rounds on target, it is very beneficial to have something that is fast and devastating. No matter how many rounds are able to be placed on target. If you see rounds impacting vehicles, concrete structure that are just crumbling and being stopped in their tracks, whether those rounds are hitting you or not, you're not going to stand up and shoot back. You're going to be looking for cover. You're going to be running for the hills. So the 6.8 Spear is a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? A very good round to use on a civilian population that would be willing to stand up in rebellions against a tyrannical government. Because I know myself, if I was in a military, had numbers, was able to have the greatest features in military technology, I would want to be quiet. I would want to be stealthy. I would want to be as accurate as possible. And that is not what the SIG Spear is designed to do. And I'm sharing the Grantham SIG Spear video screen for a reason. I want you guys to go watch this video. Not only because I think Grantham is one of the few mainstream gun tubers that is actually putting forth knowledge that would help a civilian population fighting a tyrannical government, but as long as I've known him to be on YouTube, even when he was enlisted, he always has really tried to do his best to preach and bring awareness to the more important things. It comes to dealing with the Second Amendment, what it's actually there for, how a civilian and not so much a military enlisted person, but a civilian in the United States would go about being more efficient with a firearm. So not only am I doing that because I see no harm and would like to support Grantham and his ability to continue to preach the good word, but because this video particularly on the SIG Spear will really show you how devastating of a round it is, and how the accuracy, the ability to carry rounds that has been seen to be so effective in military battle has not really been carried over to the SIG Spear. You will be able to carry less rounds. They are going to be less accurate for no more reason that the whatever you want to call it, recoil, felt recoil, whatever, the cool word is for it today, that those follow-up shots are going to be more difficult. So I don't necessarily think that military battle was one of the top priorities for this round. I think it was devastation, fear, control, power. Now, maybe those things carry over to military battle, but I think that had a lot more to do with the design of this rifle and this cartridge than going up against any one world superpower. And not only that, but us as civilians are beginning to catch on. We're beginning to wake up, and I've made this point before. No matter what side you are on, people are making the argument that the government is too powerful, that the government is being overreaching and tyrannical. And the more supply chain failure we begin to see because of COVID, the more ease of life that we begin to demand, the harder it's going to actually be for the United States to even go start a conflict with another superpower. If we were to go to war with China tomorrow, it would be devastating to both countries and would probably end in the end of the world, at least the human population. The supply chains and logistics alone would cause massive casualties, probably on the levels of the Black Plague, if not more. And that's not even talk about shots being fired. That is literally just the ability to get food to mouth to the civilian population. Now, as far as Russia goes, I think that if we had a more capable leader of the United States, for one, Russia wouldn't even be doing what they're doing. And for two, if we were going to dabble in what is not our fucking business, we would just go over there and do exactly what this rifle is designed for shock and awe, for power, for fear, for devastation, and put that shit to a stop real quick. Sure, they got nukes, but Russia's not stupid. They know exactly how far the U.S. federal government is willing to go right now. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. Not only that, but if Russia was ever to really get out of pocket, you would see more than just countries bitching and moaning and putting legislation into place. If you notice, no matter how much of a energy crisis they claim to be dealing with over in Europe, for whatever reason, whether it be it's more so has to do with their own stupidity and this global warming bullshit, this climate change agenda, I think that has more to do with their energy crisis they're seeing than what Russia's doing. But if Russia was really doing something that was hurting the European governments surrounding and nearby Russia, you would see a lot more involvement. So I don't necessarily think what the federal government is in designing or are trying to accomplish for the future has anything to do with Russia. In fact, if Russia keeps up with what they're doing, there's a good possibility that someone's going to step in and just fucking end them. Maybe not in, complete, extinction, but it will be probably to the level of like Japan and World War II. Maybe even not even nuclear. Maybe it'd be more so along the lines of Germany and World War II, where you would just see Russia lose their ability to keep their economy going, almost crash to a halt, along with a large portion of their masculinity and leading adult population dying off, which would be devastating to Russia. So I think as soon as they reach the point where they're actually a threat to more than Ukraine, if they are truly smart and just not suicidal, they would stop on their own. And to think that Russia doesn't have more capability to take what they want right now is naive. They could just be mowing down civilians day after day instead of actually trying to hunt the fighting forces of Ukraine. They could just be wiping out anyone who wasn't Russian aligned to take what they want. And they're not doing that because they know that right now they just have the left bitching, the more liberal portion of the world saying this is inhumane. But if they were actually to start doing like some genocidal type of shit, I think you would see more of the conservative side align and be more willing to defend Ukraine. But at the end of the day, you really have to understand that the Ukraine government, what's left of it, is just as fucking corrupt and immoral as Russia. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that both of those militaries are really getting their fucking shit taken to the cleaners. I think that a lot of people in the United States just don't understand how fucked up Ukraine was. Now, of course, because of Russiagate and this Russia political garbage we've been handed, a large portion of the United States just believes that because Russia is the other side, much like they believe that just because Donald Trump is the other side, that this must mean that whoever opposes those sides are the good guys. Well, that's not true. I'm biased because I'm conservative and I think Donald Trump was a good president. But if we are claiming that Donald Trump is evil, there is no way you can make an argument to say that Joe Biden and the DNC are the good guys. They might be fighting Donald Trump, but they are damn sure not trying to help the American people. And if you have an argument to be made that Donald Trump is tyrannical, oh my God. Joe Biden is just like that times a million, along with every politician for the most part. But I'm kind of getting off topic here. These are just things that we really need to start focusing on, because I think the closer and closer we get into the future, it will become more and more not only likely, but real, that the federal government will be openly at war with the American people, at least the ones that wish to continue our tradition of freedom and liberty. So anything that our military does, at least the people who have the say-so in what's being implemented as far as artillery, tactics, methods, at least on that level of our military, they're trying to really attack us. Sorry, I keep clearing my throat. I'm still congested. There's something going around, and it's like not a 24-hour flu type of thing. It is a kick your ass for 2 weeks thing. But anyway, so yeah, not trying to ride the dick of Grantham more than has already been done by most of the gun community, but if you've noticed his last couple of videos, not on weapons in particularly, but tactics, camouflage, urban survival, have had a really large undertone, as if he's almost saying, if you were a civilian being hunted by a tyrannical federal government, these are some good ideas to keep in mind. So it's not only worth looking into how devastating of a rifle this new SIG Spear is and why it's been developed, but maybe just go down the rabbit hole of the last, 10, 15 videos Grantham's put out. Of course, he has a lot better knowledge base, financial capabilities to put out content than I do. I think the influential power there will lead people to be better guided to the real point that I'm trying to bring home here. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about before I get off here tonight, if you guys aren't already asleep, is there was a document put out by Nancy Pelosi stating that because of the devastations of COVID-19, some of the things that have been implemented for politics, voting, elections will be carried out through November of 2022. I don't think there is a sane person left in America that actually thinks that COVID is affecting us to the point where we need to implement shit to do with our elections. I think it has more so to do with they are really that afraid of conservatives. You got to understand that Nancy Pelosi is just another old retarded bitch, just as much as Joe Biden is. If you don't think that Joe Biden has as much pull and power and say so, if you think there's somebody behind the scenes calling the shots for Biden, and you think that Nancy Pelosi is someone who actually has pull, you might want to rethink that. Because she is just as old and just as on her way out as Joe Biden is. There is a extreme Democrat up and rising at the moment. And whether or not there are truly some other evil forces behind the DNC that push their more known politically driven figures, there is a greater evil that is a more young, I'm not even sure what the best word to use here either is. Extreme is the only word that I can really think of that drives this home. We thought Joe Biden was going to be a moderate, not me per se, not conservatives, Republicans, but we as the on the fence, not really in the political know American. I think they thought that Joe Biden was really going to be this moderate that we so needed, even though we didn't. And you see how extreme he is. Well, he's nothing compared to the up and coming Democrats that are beginning to run for political power. If you do any research on the youngest elected person in Congress, he is a Democrat, and he has said and holds the ideals of some of the most extreme shit that I have ever heard of. This is what we are going to have to begin to combat more vigorously, because things aren't about to get easier for Americans. Things aren't about to be more free and liberating. It's about to be a lot harder. Not only have we kicked ourselves in the dick with allowing the Democrats to put us in such turmoil as far as our economy, tearing apart our military, brainwashing our children. Not only are we really going to begin to see the devastating effects of all of these things, just like COVID, it's going to take time before we really begin to feel the hurt that no one else has caused but ourselves, our own ignorance, to believe that politicians can save us. That as long as we can survive until the next election cycle, we will be okay. We will carry on as the United States of America. It is the exact opposite as that. As long as we are only willing to fight to the next election, we are going to fall further and further from where we came. We cannot hold all of our hopes and ambitions, our children's futures, in the hands of people that have not only been shown to fail us, but have also shown a level of greed and corruption that is unbelievable. That I have already laid down the argument that our forefathers would have fought against in a heartbeat. We are now allowing our government to do things not to make our lives easier, but to literally do the opposite. We have allowed them to devastate our economy, our house market. I mean, it is going to become, for, a middle-class American, impossible for you to go out and buy a house. That should be the biggest factor for you wanting to do better as a country. So let me tell you this. Who are you going to go to and elect that's going to turn that around in the amount of time that we need for no more good Americans to suffer? Now, sure, there will be politicians that make arguments, maybe even legislation that come in and help some of the things, some of the damage that has been done, but we will never regain what we have lost in any aspect of our freedoms, gun rights, financial freedoms, religious freedoms. We might get back pieces, but we will never get back what we have lost. That should be reason enough to no longer put your hope into politicians and to start thinking outside the box. Not on how to survive to the next election cycle, but how do we displace the corruption and greed from the politicians that hold power right now? I think even myself included, a lot of political commentary, influencers, social media people, YouTubers, a lot of us had said that the ship is sinking. Well, I want you to, when people say that, I want you to really imagine a ship sinking. The ship is sinking, and when that happens, just because you can still see the ship is somewhat above water does not mean that people have not already drowned. That people are not at this very moment drowning. There are already people that have worked their entire lives that have lost everything. There are already people from just political actions that have been taken over the course of COVID that have taken their own lives. When do you think there is going to be a politician that is going to be able to stop that from happening, take office? If the answer is never, you're correct. As much as I want people to wake up and understand that we have to really start implementing things as civilians that limit our federal government, as much as that needs to happen, we have to start understanding that we need some urgency behind this. If you're one of these people that say, people who want a civil war and want to fight the federal government and go start shooting shit up and actually having war on United States soil, you really think they're going to be able to take another American's life? I refuse to be a part of that. You only want it because you don't know what war really looks like. You're looking from it from the wrong perspective. You're looking at it from this idea that all of us are these Facebook FUD type of people that just want our stateside kill. Try looking at it as there are Americans, whether we like to believe it or not, that want to see us dead, that are in the process of implementing things that will kill Americans. There are Americans, not just politicians, but just civilian Americans that are participating in things that are driving our own children to suicide, to mental health issues that are unsustainable. that are forever life altering. Now, I don't care what you say. You cannot argue the fact that there are Americans that do evil shit that are worth ending. Well, that same evil shit has begun to start happening on a much larger scale than just your inner city crime associations, organizations, whatever you want to call them. Our biggest crime organization is now the federal fucking government, which is not only the biggest crime organization, but also the biggest employer of Americans. So if you think that you are going to help save lives of our children, of our future, of our country, without battling and combating other Americans, you really have missed a lot of history class. I think it's common knowledge to know that if America falls, it's going to fall from within. Not only is it common knowledge that that is more than likely the case, but it is actual facts that most of our biggest superpowers in the world that have fallen have not lasted longer than 250 years, have also fallen from within. So if you wish to save America, if you wish to preserve our freedoms and liberty for our children and generations to come, you bet your ass we're going to have to start fighting other Americans. That's just something you're going to have to get your little fucking patriotic rootin' tootin' ass over. So, and I've also really want to just point out that to say that is not to want the war. I wish it did not have to be. But it is historically proven that that is just not the case. To think that society and humans, let alone Americans, have made it to a point where this cycle has ended is absurd. There are people that are so brainwashed and have been so manipulated that they will not even say anything like what I have said in the past and here today because they are in fear that the federal government will come after them. Is that really worth a federal government that's worth protecting? Just because they're Americans? How do you feel about Americans that are pedophiles? Do you think those lives are worth protecting? Do you think those ideas are worth fighting for? Or would you go out and end pedophile lives in Minecraft if you were given the freedom to do so? Well, why is that any different than what the Democrats have done to this country? Why do we continue to say that we must be able to have political conversations with these same Democrats that are now fighting for those pedophiles? They are not only fighting for the pedophiles, they are making it easier for pedophiles to mutilate our children in our own homes without any ability to stop them. They have made it to the point where our public schools are no longer the safest place for our children anymore. They have literally implemented laws to stop us, the parents of those children, from being able to go into those schools and protect our children. What do you think a gun-free zone really does to protect? I mean, really, is there any case where gun-free zones have stopped mass shooters? Or is it that most mass shooters go to gun-free zones? But yet, you're willing to say that those Americans that put those laws into place, they're worth saving. They're worth fighting for. That we shouldn't wish to go to war with these people. How many people have said, you'll take my guns over my dead body from my cold hands? Yet, you don't feel the same way about protecting your children? You don't feel the same way about wanting to stop mass shootings? Think about that. Is the loss of your firearms the only thing that you're willing to die for? I've already shown you. I've already told you. You won't even die for that. But let's just say hypothetically you would. That's the only thing that's worth fighting other Americans for, is your freedom to keep and bear arms. That's ridiculous. And I am probably the most extreme firearm enthusiast, Second Amendment supporter that I know and that I have ever heard of. I do believe that once a criminal has served their time, that they should regain their ability to keep and bear arms. That if they are so dangerous that they cannot keep and bear arms, then maybe they shouldn't be out of prison. Maybe we shouldn't waste taxpayer money on those people because they are just that far gone. I also believe that even if it's other Americans that are coming to take our Second Amendment, that they are just as big of an enemy as any other terrorist organization that we've ever fought against. I think I can't seem to clear my throat tonight, so I might be forced to get off here. I don't want to keep just coughing in the mic for you guys. That seems a little obnoxious. But I don't want to keep coming on here and pointing out all of the travesty and tyrannical, nightmarish things that go on in our society and that continue to be pushed down our throats. I don't want my voice to constantly be the reminder of all the evil that our children face in the United States, but I have to get you to the point where this idea that nothing is worth fighting for is not the American dream. It's not the American idea. It is not patriotic to say that we should have political conversations with pedophiles. It is not patriotic to talk about gun control. It is not foolish to think because you have not seen war that there is no war with going to. We need to really start looking ourselves in the mirror every day and really try to define in a very defined definition of what our line in the sand is. I've said in the past that we have no line in the sand. There's nothing that the federal government can do that will push us to the point where we actually rise up and will rebel against them. But maybe I'm just trying to go about it the wrong way. Maybe I just need to help you define what your line in the sand is. Maybe it seems though you don't have one because you don't know how to define it. You don't know what that line in the sand looks like. Well, we have come to a point in this country that unless you figure that out, we are doomed to fail. We have to know what that line in the sand is so that we can find it, so that we know when it is crossed, so that we do not try to defend our defeats by saying, you don't want war, you don't know what war looks like, you don't want to kill other Americans, you won't die for this or that. We have to know that when that line is crossed, we will be able to do whatever needs to be done to stop it. So we have to know what that line is. If it is gun rights, well, we have to stand up and fight now because they are trying to take those from us. If it is our children's safety, we have to stand up now because they are hurting our children right now. If it is election integrity, if it is our ability to remain a free country, we have to stand up right now. And not just to what we envision in our head as tyrants. But we also have to realize that those tyrants are Americans. We have to stop with the wordplay to talk ourselves out of defending our lines in the sand, because that's what we're doing. And almost every one of us are guilty of that. I know I've heard Tim Kennedy, Mike Glover, every fucking conservative politician in the last 5 years say some retarded ass shit that completely undermines what they say they stand for. Like, I fought for this country to defend the Second Amendment, but I'm for red flag laws. That's stupid. You're literally stating oxymorons so that you can appease a bigger audience, so that you can capture more influence. Now, you may say that you don't care about those things, but if you truly didn't, you would not give a fuck who you offend. Now, I try my best to not be offensive. I cannot deny that, but that is not because I wish to appease other people. It's because I don't wish to offend people for no reason. But if what I believe in is close enough to that line, I don't give a fuck who it offends or who it appeases. I don't believe that Americans that are not for the Second Amendment, for freedom and liberty, that are not for the protection of our children, are worth saving. I believe that they are worth going to war over. That's just where I stand, and what I believe is actually being patriotic. Now, before I get off here, we're going to try to do something other than bring the mood down, and maybe talk about something that's a little bit useful. And It may not save this country, but it may play somewhat of a part. Now, I've already said that it would be beneficial to you to watch the last couple of Grantham videos on YouTube when it comes to your basic camouflage, urban survival. But some of you guys who just may now be realizing that it is a good idea to have a at least reliable battle rifle or, AR-15, whatever that may be for you. If you're just now coming to this realization or just now financially able to obtain something like that, I know there have been times in the past where these things have been hard to come by. And to have one that it is fully capable and reliable is not cheap. There is cheap stuff out there, but I think we all know the rule of three. You can't have something fast and cheap and good. You can only have two of those. So I understand that not all of us are at a position where we have fully capable, reliable rifles, and we might be working towards that, or we might have just come to that point. Well, here in a week or two, I will be going back to where I have a camera and there is a visual component to the podcast, and I will be showing you my choice in camouflage spray paint colors, techniques, brands, and the what I want you to get to take away from this is that I understand that to be able to go out and buy that rifle and kit that rifle out with, whatever optics and goodies you may choose might be a large financial sacrifice, but it is one worth taking. And I know a lot of people that are not used to making that kind of a purchase or spending that kind of money. They don't like to necessarily mess those things up. They don't want to purposefully go out and visually destroy those items that they just spent, so long saving up to buy. Or they might be able to only buy once. I know that is an option for me sometimes. I try to have all of my firearms be what they need to be, but I can only afford to make some of those really, really what they need to be. But if you were ever to come to a point where you needed to take up arms against our federal government, it would be very beneficial to you to be familiar with camouflaging your weapon. And I know that this might not be ideal for some of the people that like these new shiny firearms, but you got to get over it. There might come to a point where you have to just rattle can the shit out of that motherfucker, and that might be the deciding factor between life or death, whether or not your rifle is able to reflect sunlight, whether or not your firearm can blend in with your surroundings, whether or not the federal government can pick you out because you have a object that is black in an environment where things are not shaped that way and colored that way. You might need to be carrying or have the ability to camouflage your security items very fast, very cheap. So I want you guys to maybe work on this idea that putting a little bit of spray paint on your firearms is the end of the world. And here, when I get my Sony camera back up and running, like I said, we'll go through some of this stuff more in detail, and it will be a good change of pace for the podcast. Something a little bit different. But with that, guys, as always, I really do hope that as many as of us as possible stays safe, stays prepared. I love you guys. God bless America first. Peace, y'all.